There are people who do science with the hammer and nails of truth. Richard Feynman was one of those people. He laughed loudly, played the bongo drums in the lecture hall, wrote to the woman he loved with words that were anything but flowery, and opened safes to remind everyone to lock the door properly. Some called him a mischievous genius. Others said he was a troublemaker. But if you look closely, you will see that every prank of his targeted illusions, so the real thing could finally breathe. Tonight, we will walk with a boy who was scolded for taking apart a radio, who grew into a man that turned the difficult into simple arrows anyone could follow, and who dared to drop a small rubber ring into a glass of ice water in front of the entire world. He did not do it to beat anyone. He did it so he would not lose to himself. Are you ready? If you have ever been told, stop asking questions, this episode is a knock at your door.
1952. A quiet room with a low ceiling, where warm yellow light spills across a wooden floor worn down by countless footsteps. In the middle of the room stands the man who helped break Enigma, the machine that made all of Europe tremble now. At the defendant's table for reasons outside his professional work, bound by the old legal standards of that time. No one speaks loudly. Even the soft coughs seem to hush themselves. Only the clock keeps moving forward click by click, as if someone were tapping a steady line of periods onto the page of time. Faces that once treated him like a joke suddenly sit upright. They look at the silent man, then glance at one another. In their eyes is a mix of confusion and curiosity. A question hangs in the air, without anyone needing to say it. If he was the one who was wrong, why did the world change because of him? Outside the window, the sky is crowded with clouds. A thin blade of sunlight briefly flashes, then disappears. Everyone seems to be waiting for an explanation, but the one person who could speak chooses silence. He simply stands there, calm, hands folded before him, eyes straight ahead, as if he believes there are things that do not need a defense. The results will stand as witnesses on their own. Before the war, before the machines growled, there was a boy who walked to school in Sherborne beneath the rain. His cloak was soaked through, and his leather shoes drank up water until they felt heavy. He spoke little and often kept his head down, but inside his mind thundered with numbers, symbols, and questions that repeated and refused to fade. His classmates liked Latin, neat recitations, and ribbons pinned to a bulletin board. He preferred the back row, listening to the clock hand repeat itself and wondering, how can a simple motion measure time? He pressed his ear to the family radio, listening to the scratchy, broken sounds, and then smiled to himself when he realized that within the noise, there was still order. You only needed to know how to listen. In the afternoon, he ran alone on a damp dirt road. His steps were steady, his breathing steady. His shoes pressed into small puddles and sent brown flecks of mud up the cuffs of his trousers. No one cheered. No one needed to. On that road he practiced something basic. Patience, move steadily, breathe steadily, and you will arrive. At home, he opened a worn notebook. The paper had yellowed. The corners curled from the rain that had seeped in. He took a pen and wrote a plain, unadorned line. If thought has rules, then a machine can follow those rules. The sentence was as simple as a nod. No praise came. No response came. But to him, that line felt like a small marker planted in muddy ground so that tomorrow, when the rain fell harder, he would still know the way back. Sometimes his mother asked, "What are you listening for?" So intently. He answered softly, "I am trying to find where the order is." In a house that smelled of damp wood and black tea, that idea grew, smoldering like a small flame, never flamboyant, but warm enough to keep him from letting go. Years later, an old wooden hall with a high ceiling and forked glass windows, benches packed tightly together. The young man stood before a chalkboard, unfinished lines of chalk behind him. He spoke about something both simple and bold. Imagine a machine that can carry out any task if we describe it as clear, step-by-step instructions. Eyes glanced at one another, arms folded. The whispering was as soft as dry leaves. Someone curled a lip. Someone else shrugged. Then came a judgment as cold as ice. This idea will not go anywhere. The sentence dropped like a pebble into a deep well, making no echo, only sinking out of sight. He paused for half a beat. No arguing, no hedging. He gathered his papers carefully, as if putting chess pieces back into their box, and stepped out under the eaves. A light rain fell, and the earthy smell of wet soil rose. He took a deep breath, and let the cold air run straight into his chest, then walked on. Only one purpose filled his mind: how to prove it in practice. That evening, he opened the old notebook. The line from his childhood was still there. Its ink faded, but its meaning clearer than ever. He drew a dark pencil line beneath it, as if signing a new contract with himself. Do not chase praise. Go and find results. The next morning, he rose early. The first light of day hung heavy with mist. He brewed tea, stood by the window, and watched the trails of rain water slide down the glass. If there are rules, then a machine will follow. He repeated the thought like a mantra, and he began to writing out steps, rules, variations. Each page was a paving stone for the road ahead. In the year 1939, Europe slid into darkness. Maps stretched across long tables, crowded with red pins and blue pins like a field of tiny needles. Far offshore, up in the sky, and deep in concrete bunkers, everything moved. At the center of those movements was a machine called Enigma, which turned orders into strings of meaningless characters and then changed its key every day. Each sunrise brought a new maze. Without reading the messages, the Allies were like people blindfolded. A convoy could turn the wrong way into an ambush. A city could sound the alarm too late. A squadron could take off at the wrong, unsafe hour, and time did not wait for anyone. The gates of Bletchley Park opened to welcome minds that were different. Crossword solvers, linguists, mathematicians. They were not good at small talk and did not care much for polite chatter, but they were excellent at one thing: hunting patterns. Alan stepped in, received a desk, a thick stack of papers, a murmuring radio set, and a short mission. Turn strings of nonsense into action in type. The room smelled of printer's ink, machine oil, and pressure. Low yellow lights revealed the dark circles under everyone's eyes. On the wall hung a round clock whose minute hand crept forward as if mocking them. Every tick reminded them that tomorrow's sunrise would change the key. On the first day, they tried the easiest approach. Wrong. On the second day, they changed the assumptions and added variables. Wrong again. On the third day, the results were somewhat better, but still not enough to save a single convoy. They were wrong so many times that exhaustion rolled over them. Coffee cooled faster than expected. Pencil tips were down. Someone put their head on the desk for exactly 1 minute, then sat back up and kept going. Outside, the sky was grey. Inside, paper stacked up like white mountain ranges. Every so often, someone pulled a sheet from a pile, drew a single hard line, and sighed. Then, from small details, a spark appeared. People, no matter how disciplined, still have habits. Enigma operators sometimes repeated familiar phrases, a commonly used greeting, or the same structure. The machine could change its key every day, but habits were hard to change. The gap was there. Alan spoke softly and clearly. Do not try to guess everything. Gather what you can rely on. The repeated points. The room went quiet for a moment. Everyone looked at the chalkboard, where 4 words had appeared. Repeated points, greeting ritual. No one cheered. No one needed to. Everyone understood they had just found the real thread. He divided the shifts. The morning shift would sweep for habits. The afternoon shift would verify. The night shift would test variations. On the wall, the clock was set with precision to the second. Each time the minute hand moved, someone lifted their head, as if hearing an invisible soldier urge them, hurry up. Night fell faster than usual. In the cramped room, the sounds of machines and pencils on paper braided together into a dry but relentless music. No one complained. No one claimed credit. They simply worked, as if they had already made an appointment with tomorrow's sunrise. We will be on time. After years sealed inside thick rooms, Richard stepped outside like someone who had just walked through a storm. The sky felt strangely ordinary. Trees were still green, the streets still noisy, and the streetcars still screeched along the old tracks. But inside him, a small vow formed. From now on, if he had to touch difficult things, he would tell them in the language of people. In the classroom, he did not stand like a post. He moved, holding a piece of chalk as if it were a conductor's baton. I do not want you to revere me, he said. I want you to see. Then he laughed, a crisp laugh that rolled across the front row and bounced to the back like a skipping stone on water. A student wrote in a journal, "He made my fear." Sit down. Fear had been crouching on her shoulders. Under Richard's storytelling hands, it slid into a chair, let its legs dangle, and listened. Think of this like a forest, he said, drawing a tangle of winding lines. When you do not know the way, you panic. But if I cut a small footpath, you can pass through. He pulled arrows from one point to another. The arrows met like people meeting, shook hands, then parted. No long formulas were needed, only imagination, only touch. He let the class breathe. Whenever laughter sparked, he paused and smiled with them, like a conductor who knows when to lift his hands and when to let them fall. A student who used to be terrified of wall-to-wall writing suddenly raised her hand. I think I understand now. Do not think, Richard joked. See, and when you have seen it, if you forget tomorrow, we will see it again, late at night. Richard's room carried a strange sound, bongo drums. 2 low wooden drums with taut skins, each one playfully given a name as if he were calling to children. The beats went tuck, 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 steady and sure, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, sometimes stopping altogether like a held breath, then starting again like a laugh. People asked, "Why play the drums?" "To hear myself again," he said. The mind can run very far away. The bongo drums pull it back, and indeed, the bongo drums were like a soft bridle for the mind. When he taught the next day, his voice was rounder. His words were less sharp like a knife and warmer like a blanket. Listeners did not feel interrogated. They felt taken by the hand across a slippery path. Richard stopped by the cafeteria with a simple tray, a bit of mashed potatoes, some vegetables, and a cup of black coffee. Someone asked a question that most people would push to later, to an email, or to a future seminar. He set the tray down, picked up a spoon and a cup, and arranged them on the table like props. Suppose this, he said. The spoon is the person, the cup is the condition, and you want to. The whole table burst out laughing. 5 minutes later, the prickly question had lost its thorns. 20 minutes later, the person who asked forgot that he had ever feared it. Richard's magic was not turning water into wine. He turned awkwardness into a moment of aha. People left with a quiet smile, mumbling, "So, this is actually doable." One rainy afternoon, he sat in the last row of a grand hall. Blue rim lights traced the stage. Charts flowed smoothly on the screen like a commercial for a new display. Around him came murmurs of admiration, but he could not smell anything real. He frowned. What did you measure? Where did you test it? If you repeat it tomorrow, will it still hold? When the Q&A began, he stood. His voice was not harsh, but it was steady. I see that the performance is very good. Where is the checking? The room ceased up. The presenter stumbled. Someone was annoyed. Someone exhaled in relief. Outside the door, a student ran after him. If you do that, people will hate you, Richard laughed. If truth hates me, then I should be afraid. But if a performance hates me, that is fine. Richard did not go around trying to open every safe he saw. But whenever he heard people tell themselves, "Do not worry, this is definitely fine," his ears perked up. Not because he was paranoid, but because he knew that the illusion of safety is the softest pillow, and it lulls people to sleep very well. That time, after showing how a locked set could be opened in steps that were simple to a frightening degree. He left a note. "You are sleeping soundly in a house with the door left open. The keeper of the safe flushed." A week later, the procedure changed. No one thanked him loudly. But accidents that do not happen almost never make the news. Richard considered that reward more than enough. Silence. Sometimes, amid laughter, he suddenly grew quiet. It was raining. The window was speckled with drops. He opened a drawer and took out an old letter. He did not read it. He just smoothed the fold with his finger. Memories washed through him. The smell of disinfectant. Arline's voice, thin as paper but warm enough to burn his hand. He put the letter away and went to class. No one knew a small cloud had just passed through him, but listeners could feel it. Every story he told carried a warm thread running through it, like a tight seam in a quilted coat. "We must be joyful," he said softly, "because we still have days to be joyful." Then he laughed loudly again, tapped a pen on the desk, and the whole class joined in with laughter. On a weekend afternoon, he stood in the middle of a children's science fair. The place was noisy, scented with popcorn, and filled with balloons bobbing in the air. He set up a small table and a few everyday objects: a cup of water, a piece of string, a ball, a handkerchief. He did something very small, explained it very briefly, and invited the child to touch it herself. A little girl furrowed her brow, then burst out laughing. "I get it." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. She was afraid. And now he is smiling. Richard bent down and whispered to the girl, "There is nothing to be afraid of when you and the truth are on the same team." Then he stood up and looked at the sky, as if speaking to someone long gone. "Do you see this? I am still telling stories when a person has chosen to stand beside the truth long enough. A day will come when the truth needs that person to protect it in a crowded place." Richard's stories, his ethical pranks, the times he asked the hard questions and accepted being disliked together, they tightened a string, and an event was coming that would make that string snap to life. One rubber ring, one glass of ice water, a room with far too much prestige to admit fault, and a man who once took apart a neighbor's radio and refuses to pretend. The room is wide, with a high ceiling, polished wood, and white blue lights. The air conditioning smells like clean metal. Cameras turn. Papers are stacked thick, and familiar voices speak in a careful tone that avoids the point. Outside, an entire country waits for an answer. Inside, some people only want to close the file quietly. Richard sits to one side. There is no flashy tie and no theatrical gestures. There is only one bag, and inside it is a small rubber ring. He stands. He opens the bag. He takes out a glass of water with clear ice cubes. He speaks very softly. "When it is cold, some things contract. If this part is meant to keep something sealed, but in the cold it loses its elasticity, then..." He does not finish the sentence. He dips the ring into the glass, waits a few seconds, pulls it out, and tugs it lightly. The ring is stiff. A ballpoint pen drops from someone's hand. A tiny click. He does not shout, and he does not accuse. He only says, "The truth looks like this." Half the room stands with him for a second. The other half stands against him in that same second. Both halves, strangely, are silent. He adds exactly one more line, flat as a tabletop. For successful technology, truth must go before public relations, all the beauty that came before the charts. The reports, the minutes suddenly becomes the backdrop to a single small act. That act does not need a shout out. It blows into the room the very scent Richard has talked about all his life. The scent of what is real. People often ask, why do we remember this line? Because it has few words, because it does not compromise, and because it is costly in the way that years of loss can make a sentence grow large. That day, some call him a hero. Others call him the person who ruined a party. He does not go home to read comments. He walks a long way. The city smells of exhaust and toasted bread. He stops by a sidewalk stand and orders a black coffee. The vendor does not know who he is. Good. He sits and exhales. Being real is tiring, but being fake is more tiring. He chooses the first kind of tired. The strange thing about truth is that it does not win right away. It vibrates. It vibrates inside the people who saw it. It vibrates in the night when they lie down. It vibrates the next day when they pick up an object and suddenly remember the stiffened rubber ring in the eyes. Somewhere, procedures change quietly. Somewhere, meetings grow less decorated. Somewhere, a young engineer checks again by hand before writing OK, and Richard. He goes to class, picks up the chalk, and smiles as always. Shall we continue the story we left unfinished yesterday? People talk about awards, ceremonies, and photos with red eyes from the camera flash. But what Richard kept in his heart were very short lines. Teacher, I get it now. That line is as light as a leaf falling onto a lake. Yet Richard knew that beneath the surface, the entire lake was rippling. How many people once believed they did not belong anywhere near difficult ideas? How many were made to feel foolish by shows of mysterious brilliance? They came to hear him and left with a new feeling. I am not stupid. It is just that all this time, no one invited me in using the language of people. Character can spread like the smell of fresh bread. Where he taught, young people began to imitate the way of making things seen. They cut down on slides and brought in real objects. They paused at the right moments so silence could speak. They did not perform to earn applause. They did the work so that other people would be safe in a real way. One autumn day, a woman who had once been afraid of his class shyly bought her son a small set of bongo drums. So he can hear himself again, she said. Richard read this in a letter. He sat there smiling to himself for a long time. There is a letter he never sent. It begins like this. My dear, today I told another story. Very young people laughed loudly the way you used to laugh. I stopped in the middle of the class because I remembered that joy is the most serious work. He folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, like someone lighting an oil lamp at home. That light shone across the room. Anyone who passed by felt a little warmer. Someone said, "You are a trickster." He answered, "Perhaps. But if I am playing a trick, it is to peel the layer off our eyes." His kind of trickster is gentle. He brings people to meet the truth instead of avoiding it. And once they meet it, they are no longer afraid. They touch it with their fingertips, like touching a wild animal that has stopped trembling. Honesty is not slamming a table. Honesty is placing a rubber ring into a glass of ice water, keeping silent at the right moment, laughing when it is time, being stern when it is needed, and refusing to dress the truth up so it will please anyone. Today, you met the boy who took apart a radio, the young man who held on to letters the way you hold on to your breath, and the man who placed a rubber ring into a glass of ice water to make the truth speak up. Richard Feynman, a kind trickster in service of honesty. Now it is your turn. Was Feynman a mischievous genius, or a madman who dared to tell the truth? Tell us about the radio you once took apart in your life, that moment when curiosity got you scolded. Leave a comment below. If you enjoy the way we draw so you can see, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, so you do not miss new episodes in the playlist Genius or Madman, Science and Tech.